They say love makes you blind, but I believe it simply makes you foolish. After 6 years of marriage, built on promises we vowed never to break, or so I thought, I learned the hard way that betrayal is all too familiar. Both LLA and I had tasted the bitterness of deceit. I had been hurt by my first wife, and she had been cast aside by her ex, Hank, for someone younger. When we first met, we found solace in our shared experiences and made a pact that honesty would guide us forward. We had witnessed enough falsehoods to understand that we wanted no part in that narrative. Thus, we dedicated ourselves to this life together, forming a comfortable routine. I won't deny that I became complacent. After all, this was us. No secrets, no lies, just a quiet understanding between two people. Today marked our 6th anniversary. We had planned a grand celebration with friends for the weekend, but tonight would be an intimate dinner for just the two of us. Nothing extravagant, just a moment to reflect on the years we had endured together. That morning, during breakfast, LLA casually mentioned her plans to attend a tennis lesson later in the day and run a few errands before returning home for our evening together. I nodded, feeling a wave of sentimentality wash over me. After 6 years, my desire to make her happy was still strong. Right then, I resolved to leave work early, pick up a nice bottle of wine, and perhaps even lend a hand with dinner. A simple night for just us, maybe with a toast to the next 6 years. How romantic, I thought. She smiled as she waved me off, coffee mug in hand, looking just as she did when we first embarked on this journey together. It felt reassuring, as if what we had was still solid. Looking back, it's difficult to identify the exact moment that unsettling feeling began to creep in. As I stepped out the door that morning, all I could think about was the surprise I had planned for her, a small gesture to commemorate our years together. Little did I know what surprise awaited me later that afternoon. As I finished up my task at the office, I replayed the plans I had mentally crafted that morning. The quiet dinner, the toast. It all seemed simple enough. But as the day dragged on, an odd feeling nagged at me. I couldn't shake it. It was nothing specific, just an instinctual sense, a gentle nudge from my gut that something was amiss. So for no particular reason, I opened the live feed from our home security camera, convincing myself that I was only trying to catch her as she left for tennis, so I could set up my surprise perfectly. But as the screen loaded, my stomach dropped. The kind of feeling that hits when you realize you're witnessing something you shouldn't. There was LLA, all right, but instead of her usual tennis attire, she was stepping out in a red dress I hadn't seen in years. The form-fitting fabric clung to her figure, complemented by heels and flawless makeup. I had completely forgotten she even owned that dress, let alone kept it tucked away in the closet. It was certainly not the kind of outfit you'd wear for tennis or running errands. My mind raced, desperately trying to rationalize the situation. Maybe there was a reason for it. Perhaps she had a special gathering to attend after her tennis lesson that I hadn't been informed about. Yet nothing seemed to fit. All I could grasp was that this dress had nothing to do with tennis. And if she was wearing it, her plans for the day were as far removed from our anniversary as possible. Curiosity quickly morphed into suspicion. I pulled up the GPS tracker I had installed on her car years ago under the pretense of security. I rarely used it, practically forgetting it existed until now. Today, however, it felt like it was beckoning me. I watched a little dot on the map shift from our neighborhood to downtown, not anywhere near the tennis courts or grocery stores. In that instant, I knew I had to find out where she was headed. My workday was over, so I grabbed my keys and headed out. I arrived at the location where her car was parked, right outside Fellini's, an upscale restaurant that once held special significance for us. It was the type of place we reserved for anniversaries, birthdays, and moments we wanted to cherish. I parked a little further up the street, leaning forward in my seat as I watched her step out of the car and walk toward the entrance. That's when I spotted him. Hank, standing right at the door, as if he had been waiting there forever. He was the same man who had left her for someone younger, someone seemingly more thrilling. For a moment, my mind went blank as I stared, transfixed, while she approached him, kissed him on the cheek, and nestled against him, her arms slipping around his waist as they strolled into the restaurant together. Just like that, every ounce of optimism or doubt I had evaporated. I remained in my car for a minute, stunned. As anger and hurt settled deeper, with each passing second. Despite the chaos inside me, I felt an odd sense of detachment. I picked up my phone, opened the camera, and began snapping pictures, capturing every moment: a hug, a smile, a kiss. Each image was a stark reminder of her betrayal, preserved right there on my phone. One part of me felt numb, while the other, still haunted by every lie I had endured in my previous marriage, began to plot my next moves. This would not end the way she anticipated. Sitting in my car with my phone in hand, I stared at the screen, flipping through the photos I had just taken. Each shot felt like another dagger to the gut. There was LLA, all smiles, leaning intimately against Hank, the ex she had claimed to be over long ago. Not just close, but affectionate. Genuinely happy, as if he were someone she cared for deeply. It was unmistakable: the kiss, the way she held his arm, the look in her eyes. She was all in. Whatever justification she had crafted in her mind didn't matter. The evidence was clear in black and white. I had seen enough. After a few minutes, I set my phone down, the initial shock giving way to a cold, quiet determination. I had seen something like this before, long ago, and if there was one lesson I had learned, it was to act quickly. The last thing I wanted was to hear excuses, stammering apologies, or her attempts to explain what I already understood. Yet I would be lying if I said part of me didn't feel almost numb. You think you know someone, that you're immune to the pain, and then you witness something like this: a kiss, a smile, an evening spent with an ex. I didn't want to confront her in public, where she could easily turn it into a dramatic scene. No, that was reserved for later. Somewhere she wouldn't be able to squirm her way out of it. A place where I could lay everything out clearly. I glanced at the clock. It was a little after 6. I decided to head back to the office to collect my thoughts. It was a strangely satisfying choice. Like I was methodically working through the final steps of a problem I had already solved. I shifted the car into drive and made my way back. Sitting at my desk, staring blankly at my computer, I reached for my phone again. I scrolled past the photos and opened my contacts, searching for a number I hadn't thought about in some time. My lawyer, the same one who had handled my last divorce. The irony wasn't lost on me. I pressed call, and after a couple of rings he answered. "What can I do for you?" "I'm going to need papers," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Tonight, if possible." There was a brief pause on the other end, as if he understood the inevitability of this conversation. "Consider it done," he said smoothly. "I'll have everything ready by this evening. I assume you're in a hurry." I let out a half-hearted laugh, one that echoed the bitterness I felt inside. Everything was in motion. The plan was set. My lawyer had all he needed, and an odd sense of calm washed over me, knowing it would be executed before she even suspected anything. I drove home, pulling into the driveway, feeling as detached as ever. I knew she would be waiting, maybe even with a smile, as if she hadn't just spent the evening wrapped around her ex. She had spent hours devising lies for me, but now it was my turn to surprise her. As I parked in the driveway that evening, the house looked as serene as ever, almost picture-perfect. Part of me wished I could walk inside, forget what I had seen, and pretend that this was still our life. But I wasn't in the mood for pretending, not anymore. I stepped inside, and there she was in the kitchen, humming softly as she set the table. She had lit candles and arranged our best plates, even the wine glasses we reserved for special occasions. But just like that, any lingering doubt I had vanished. She was pulling out all the stops, putting on a performance, as if she had genuinely planned to celebrate our anniversary together. When she noticed me, her eyes sparkled, and she greeted me with a warm smile. "Welcome home. Dinner's almost ready," she said, as if nothing were amiss. I forced a smile in return, thinking perfect timing. But inside, I felt completely detached, watching her as if she were a stranger. Every movement seemed rehearsed, from how she laid down the silverware to the casual kiss she placed on my cheek. This wasn't the woman I thought I had married. This was someone playing a part, and I was merely the audience. Dinner began quietly, with a few simple exchanges about our day. Nothing seemed out of place, but I sensed that she could feel something was off. She kept glancing at me, perhaps expecting me to mention our anniversary or say something romantic. But all I could think about was the image of her with Hank, every laugh and touch replaying in my mind. Finally, she set down her fork and looked at me a bit too closely. You seem distant tonight. Are you okay? I took a sip of my wine, letting the silence linger just a bit too long. I'm fine, I replied, keeping my tone even. It's just been a busy day. She offered a small, understanding smile. Well, I'm glad we can relax tonight. I've been looking forward to this. That was all I could take. I set my glass down, leaned back, and let her words sink in for a moment before leaning forward, studying her closely. So, how was your day, LLA? She looked momentarily taken aback, but recovered quickly. The usual grocery shopping, nothing exciting. She was good. I'll give her that. The lie slipped out effortlessly, her tone casual, as if she had merely been running errands instead of wrapping herself around Hank. I felt my jaw tighten, and it took every ounce of self-control to remain calm, allowing her to continue with the charade. I nodded slowly. Grocery shopping, huh? In the gym. Yes, she replied, looking at me with that easy smile, as if she had nothing to hide. I wanted everything to be perfect for the night. Perfect, right? The anger began to bubble up inside me, but I forced myself to breathe and let her finish her act. Funny, I said finally, pulling my phone from my pocket because that's not what I saw. Her smile faltered just slightly, but it was enough. I turned my phone toward her, showing the first photo. The one of her and Hank at Fellini's, her arm around him, his hand resting on her waist. The color drained from her face, and for a brief moment, she looked like a stranger. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She knew I had seen everything. Ella stared at the photo, her expression pale. The smile wiped clean from her lips. Her mouth opened and closed as if she were grasping for the right words, but coming up empty. The silence hung heavily between us, and I could see her mind racing, trying to figure out how to dig herself out of this mess. Jack, she finally managed, her voice trembling. I can explain, it was just lunch with Hank. I didn't want to upset you, so I didn't tell you. I let out a bitter, humorless laugh that even surprised me. Lunch? I echoed. Is that what you call it? Because from where I was sitting, it looked a whole lot more like a date. She swallowed hard, glancing away, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. Jack, I swear it was nothing. Hank just wanted to catch up, and I thought, why not? I was curious, I guess. Curious? I repeated, feeling anger seep into my voice despite myself. So curious that you felt the need to put on a dress? I hadn't seen her in years kiss him and lean into him, like he was someone she genuinely cared for. She winced, panic flashing in her eyes. It's not what you think. I didn't want to hurt you. It didn't mean anything, she pleaded, reaching for my hand across the table. I pulled back, feeling her gesture was nothing more than a cruel joke. Didn't mean anything. I shook my head, unable to fathom that she thought that excuse would convince me. You seriously expect me to believe that? And I could see the desperation etched on her face. Jack, I just wanted him to see how far I've come, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. That's all. I wanted him to see what he missed out on. It was stupid, I know. I got caught up in it. Caught up in it. I echoed, letting the words linger in the air. How many times have you met with him, LLA? Was this just a one-time thing? Or is this part of your new routine? Her eyes widened, and she shook her head vigorously. No. I swear it was just this once. I promise you promises. I was done with promises. Well, if it was just this once, I said slowly, then you won't mind showing me your phone, right? She froze, her face draining of color. Her grip on her phone tightened until her knuckles turned white. Come on, my phone is private. I leaned back, observing her with the same detached calm that had carried me through the day. Private? You mean like your lunch with Hank? Don't worry, LLA. If there's nothing to hide, this should be easy. Show me your messages. She didn't move, her gaze dropping to the floor, her grip on her phone still unyielding. In that moment, I understood everything I needed to know. I didn't even need to see those messages. Her silence spoke volumes. Slowly, I stood up and slipped my phone back into my pocket. You don't need to worry about it, LA. I said, my voice cold and distant. I already have everything I need. The look on her face was a mix of guilt and fear, as if she knew this was a point of no return. She opened her mouth to speak, perhaps to offer another excuse or plea. But I raised my hand to stop her. I wasn't interested in anything else she had to say. I turned and walked toward the living room, leaving LLA at the table, still clutching her phone as if it were her last lifeline. I didn't feel anger anymore, just a steady, clear resolve. After all the years we had spent together, after the promises we had made, perhaps this was the only way it could end. When I returned, I held a folder in my hands and extended it toward her. Done. She stared at the folder, initially confused, as if she didn't understand what she was seeing. Slowly, realization dawned on her. Her face crumpled, a mixture of shock and panic crossing her features as she opened it and saw the divorce papers staring back at her. "Jack," she whispered, shaking her head. "Please, can we talk about this? I didn't mean for it to go this far. It was a mistake. A stupid mistake." I looked at her, keeping my expression calm and detached. "It may have been a mistake," I said, "but it wasn't a small one. I had promised myself after my last marriage that I would never go through this again, never tolerate lies and half-truths, no matter the excuse." Tears filled her eyes as she clutched the papers, her hands trembling. "Jack, please don't do this. I can fix this. I was just stupid, okay? It was nothing. I don't want to lose you over something like this." I almost laughed, but there was no humor left in it. "It's too late, LLA. If there was even a chance to fix this, you would have shown me your phone. You would have been honest from the start, but you didn't, and now it's over." She opened her mouth to respond, but I wasn't interested in hearing anymore. I was done with the explanations, the pleading, and the hollow apologies. This was all just noise at this point. I took a step back, watching her struggle to process everything. I had planned this moment in my mind, carefully and calmly, and I was more than ready to walk away. I called my lawyer that day, the same one who handled my first divorce. He hadn't missed a beat, saying he'd have everything ready by tonight. And here we were. Apparently, they had a whole template for situations like this. Down at the papers, the weight of the reality finally settling in. Her lips trembled as her expression shifted from shock to something resembling defeat. I raised my glass, a half-smile creeping onto my face. "To our anniversary, LA, may it be unforgettable." With that, I took a long sip, watching as she sat there, the reality hitting her square in the face. All the lies, the betrayals, every calculated decision she had made. This was the culmination of it all. No more acting, no more excuses, just a heavy truth hanging in the room. Months passed, and during that time, I managed to push LLA out of my mind for the most part. I hadn't expected to feel such a sense of calm, a strange closure. In the end, maybe this was the only way I could have felt. I had kept my word. She was the one who had thrown everything away. It was around this time that I heard through mutual friends what had happened with LLA. As it turned out, after I walked away, she ended up with Hank. Maybe they thought they could pick up where they left off, pretending she hadn't spent 6 years with me. Or perhaps she convinced herself he was worth the chaos. But old habits die hard. It wasn't long before LLA's name resurfaced in conversation again. And this time, the story was different. Hank had apparently left her. Not for the first time, and certainly not the last. To add insult to injury, LLA was pregnant. They had moved in together for a while, trying to build something out of what she had destroyed, but Hank had never been the type to stick around for long. When he found out about the baby, he bailed, leaving her alone to face the consequences of their actions. I heard that for a while. She tried to track him down, trying to get him to face what they had created together, but true to form. Hank had already moved on to the next thing, vanishing from her life as effortlessly as he had entered it, just as he had done before. There was a strange irony in it all. She had destroyed our marriage, thrown away everything we had built together for someone who wouldn't lift a finger when she needed him most. The man she had once loved, the man she had risked everything for, had become nothing but a fleeting moment in her life. And now she was left alone, burdened with the weight of it all. From what I heard, she was barely holding it together. The woman who had once been so proud, so sure of herself, was now a shadow of her former self. As for Hank, he had moved on without a second thought, living his life as if none of it had ever happened. I'll admit, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction as I heard the story unfold. Not happiness exactly, There's nothing enjoyable about witnessing someone else's suffering. But it felt like justice, plain and simple. It was the natural consequence of the choices she had made. I was just relieved to be free from it all. I hadn't sought revenge or wished to see her in pain. All I wanted was to be done with the lies, the broken promises, and the endless cycle of betrayal. And now, finally, I had that. Months later, I found myself living a life I hadn't anticipated. It was quiet, simpler, without the constant push and pull of trust, suspicion, and hollow promises. I had shed the baggage of our broken vows and moved on, piece by piece, until the entire deal felt like a distant memory. But memories have a way of lingering, and I still heard bits and pieces about LLA from our mutual friends. Her life, it seemed, was not unfolding in the grand, exciting way she had envisioned. The short-lived fling with Hank had left her alone, and from what I gathered, she was now scrambling to make sense of it all. She remained as stubborn as ever, refusing to acknowledge how her choices had led her to this point. Hank, predictable as always, was off chasing the next thrill, showing no interest in looking back. Hearing all this didn't bring me any real joy, but it did make me feel certain that walking away had been the best decision I'd made in years. They say karma catches up with everyone, but sometimes people do an excellent job of sabotaging their own lives. In contrast, my life had taken a turn for the better. Without the weight of betrayal hanging over me, I could focus on what truly mattered. Finding peace, learning to trust myself again, and appreciating a life free from lies and half-hearted apologies. It felt almost surreal, but I had finally found the calm I had been craving. There's a saying that if you sit by the river long enough, you'll see the bodies of your enemies float by. I never thought it applied to me until now. I hadn't sought revenge, but somehow life had handed it to me in its own quiet, almost poetic way. LLA, Hank, and the tangled mess they had made were all behind me, and I could finally view it all with the detached perspective it deserved. If anything, I had learned a simple truth. Sometimes the best revenge is realizing you're better off. I didn't need to do anything to make them suffer. Their choices had taken care of that for them. As for me, I was just moving on a little colder, a little wiser, and perhaps with a touch more irony. Because sometimes life is a funny way of sorting things out without you having to lift a finger.